I, just before we dive into the true topic, about which you are the experts, I am not the expert on the conversation about adoption, but I have some things I'd love to share, and some questions I'd like us all to wrestle with, if that is possible via this technology, which, by the way, I love Zoom. I'm just going to say, with my troubles were user error, not Zoom errors. So I'll just admit that straight up. So any thoughts that pop up, you can speak up or write them related to that lengthy bio. Anyone? Let's see. David, any comments? No? Is that a bath? Anybody been in the bathtub this week? No, you guys, come on. Shower. Okay, shower. Okay, 2, 3 showers, 4. Oh, good. All right, good. So that all counts. My background took me through Indiana. I went to DePaul University in Greencastle. Is anybody familiar with Greencastle, Indiana? Okay, good. All right. I see, Jennifer, I don't know, you're so lucky. You're right at the base of a pier by a lake right now. You're so lucky.
Not really. That's a virtual background.
Okay. And I see
it
that
is our place at the lake.
Yeah, Mindy is watching the sunset. I imagine that's over the Pacific somewhere, or maybe it was the sunrise. So I studied at DePaul University, and so it's an honor to speak to you about adoption, but it's also great to connect with folks who know and love the Midwest. I learned to scuba dive in a quarry south of Greencastle. So my career as a marine biologist began in those murky quarry waters, which I like to say is a really good place to learn to scuba dive, because every dive for the rest of your life is better than your first dive. And so it's kind of a good way to start out, rather than people who learn to scuba dive in some South Pacific tropical place and it just gets worse from there. Wherever you go around the world, it does get better when you start not diving in cold quarries. So I became a marine biologist. I'm going to just tell you a little bit of my personal story, and I think David's heard a little bit of this, but I was adopted by my parents, Wallace Jr. and Sheila Nichols. And after being, kind of in limbo for a few months, they found me. And from a very young age, I always found the water to be soothing and to be comforting, to be my happy place. And I didn't think much about it. I just thought it was a very normal thing. And it turns out lots of people feel that way, that especially kids. You get in the water, you just want to stay there. But I was a pretty shy kid. You would call me an introvert these days, but we didn't use that language back then. And I stuttered pretty severely. So I didn't like to speak much out loud. I liked to write. I liked to observe and think, but I didn't like to converse much. So when you're in the water, people don't ask you questions when you're underwater. It's a quiet place, not a lot of talking going on. It's very more non-verbal communication. And so for some of those reasons, I found it to be a place I could escape, the noise, the distractions, but also the conversations on land. And I look back on that now with a different kind of understanding as an adult. And then after having, David mentioned this book, Blue Mind, which we are wrapping up the online book club this week, or I would invite you all to start the online book club, but we've been reading it for the last 68 days online in a Facebook Live group. And so fast forward a bit, I started getting curious as a scientist, as a marine biologist, why water pulled me so much. And I went looking for a book like this one, and I couldn't find it. I couldn't find the kind of book that I was hoping to find. There were books about your brain on music and how music is medicine. It can change our mood. It can help calm us. It can connect us. It can boost our creativity. It can take your energy up if you want to get really like pumped up for your exercise, or it can switch your mood the other way. It can be a backdrop to mourning and grief. It can be the backdrop to romance. So there were books about that, but I wanted to find that kind of book related to water. And when I went looking for it, it didn't exist. I couldn't find a book like that. And tried to get some neuropsychologists that I knew to write it. I pitched it to a guy named Oliver Sacks, who was a late great neurologist. And his answer to that suggestion that he write a book about his love of water and the brain, his suggestion was, you do it. That's what he said. It's a fine idea. You do it. And so 5 years later, I worked on this book, and 5 years later got it published and was able to give him a copy of my book before he passed away. And so that's kind of a little bit of the background. And I think where this conversation gets interesting, I think why David and I have hit it off so much is the combination of the interest in water and the observation that it can be a source of healing, of relaxation, a way to calm our anxiety, sort of soothe your nerves if you're feeling that way, what we refer to as red mind. It can sometimes help pull us out of gray mind, which is how we refer sort of in a colloquial way to burnout and breakdown and even mild depression, referred to as gray mind. Red mind would be anxiety, distraction, overload, kind of our new normal in this high-tech, fast-paced world. Even pre-pandemic, red mind was still pretty abundant. And so what I've learned is that when we get into the water, it switches us into a different mode that's referred to as the default mode, a neurological mode. Switches our state of mind. We refer to this as blue mind, but there are more technical chemical ways to refer to this state of mind. And it helps us calm ourselves. And whether it's in the bathtub or in that ocean where the sun's setting or the sun rising, it may be a pool, maybe a hot tub, maybe a walk in the rain if you enjoy the rain. Maybe a quarry, maybe a creek, your shower, whatever your water is, the lakes. We can all imagine the water that sort of is our home water, whatever it may be. Even people who would say, I'm not really a water person, like my mom. She grew up in Green Bay, Wisconsin, and at an early age, a guy named Jim Bino dunked her repeatedly and made her very fearful of water. And I've looked forward to the chance to meet Jim Bino and give him a little piece of my mind, because he changed my life permanently, because my mom would never get in the water with us because of that fear, but she loved that second floor balcony view of the water, maybe with, a margarita at sunset. That was her water. That's always where, she would be if we were, she'd be watching us in the pool, or she'd be looking at the ocean, but not getting in it. So this blue mind idea extends to being near, in, on, or underwater. So all of them work. It extends from wild water to domestic water. So wild water being our lakes, our creeks, our rivers, our oceans. Our domestic water being pools, tubs, spas, showers, baths. even sprinklers in the yard. And then virtual water, the kind, maybe that's your screensaver, perhaps your favorite water poetry. There's music about water that, you can probably imagine some of your favorite songs that relate to the water you love, whether it's boating or the ocean. It could be Jimmy Buffett or Jack Johnson, or maybe some of that country music talks about boats, and maybe have some of your thoughts on that. I know people can post their favorite Blue Mind song in the comments. So we've got this idea that's pretty intuitive. It turns out it is in fact an ancient idea. Every spiritual tradition talks about this in their sacred texts across all traditions. So, the more familiar one would be the 23rd Psalm, which I will apologize in advance. I'm going to give you a slightly off-color version of it, but the summary of the 23rd Psalm is when the shit's hitting the fan, get your butt down to the water, saith the Lord. And that shit hitting the fan may be, a tough day, a tough week, a tough life, a tough year. And in the 23rd Psalm, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, right? The valley of the shadow of death, that's a bad day. That's the shit's hitting the fan. I mean, if you're going to walk through the valley of the shadow of death, that's a bit rough. And so the Psalm says, get down to the water and soothe your soul. There, right there. King David, 3,000 years ago. So again, this not a new idea by any means, and all spiritual traditions around the world have something like that, or repeatedly that statement that the water is necessary for all life, but it's also necessary for emotional health. And so you may be wondering, why am I here talking to this particular group? And to me, it's really clear as an adoptee, and I have an adoptive brother and 3 foster sisters. There can be different kinds of stressors, obviously, that are not as familiar to your peers, or maybe not as familiar to your siblings, not as familiar to your parents. And what my experience was that water was kind of my best friend. And if I could give fellow adoptees, or really any fellow humans, but we'll stick with this subject matter for the moment, a tip or a bit of advice would be to develop your relationship with your water in some way, because it will be your best friend throughout your life, from childhood all the way through to your last breath. You may even want to go say goodbye to your water before you check out. And you may want to have your ashes scattered over that water by your loved ones, kind of as a way to force them to go to that water and chill out, and maybe cry a little there, which is almost cliche. We'd have honeymoons and ceremonies at the water. We memorialize loved ones by the water. And there's an obviousness to this, but we don't teach it well. And I went to the 24th grade, which is a lot of school. My kids who are in high school think I'm nuts. Really. I think that there must be something wrong with me to go to the 24th grade. And at no point in those 24 grades did anybody ever talk about this, that water is a source of emotional, physical, and social wellness. I think that's an opportunity. It's a bit of a shame that hasn't happened more, but I view it more as an opportunity right now for us. I'm going to put you in this category, having participated in this conversation. You now carry some responsibility to pass it on to those who may find it helpful. And so that's kind of the overview idea. And I think I might maybe ask you, and maybe David has some insights and some topics that we might want to dig in. And so we've got Southern Cross, Crosby, Stills and Nash, Led Zeppelin, The Ocean. That's way up there. Toes in the Water by Zach Brown Band. There's a song called Boats. I don't know if you know that song, another country song. So anyway, let's see if David, you want to toss a
Sure. Well,
question?
you said, Jay, I appreciate that. You said a mouthful there. You know, what resonated with me and perhaps others in the room was the fact that there is, in fact, lots of science between the therapeutic benefits to being on or around or even having images or sounds of the water nearby. But then you talked about what your experience was as growing up. And as an adoptee, that's really important to me, right? I can look at this and say, yeah, all that science makes sense. Absolutely. I need to work to do this. I need to build water into my daily routine. I need that. But even more importantly, as an adoptee, I look at that sense of connection, right? I look at that confusing time in my life when I found water as just a wee lad of 6 years old. And as a matter of fact, I'm now living on that body of water that I first was introduced to at 6 years old. I'm 300 yards away from the beach where I was swimming. And to me, that's the power of the connection that you described. You called it my best friend. And I think that's an excellent way to articulate that, but it's so much more, right? It's not just a sense of connection, and it's not an identity with a lifestyle. Some people may have that, but that's not what we're talking about here. It's a sense of connection, not only to a community, but a source of healing, right? Something bigger, as I described in your bio, something bigger to connect to and identify with. And there's the key word, the identity, right? I identify with this healing community in ways that I'm not always able to identify with other parts of my life, or even able to fill in parts of my identity to describe. But this one is so obvious and so apparent and so powerful to me. Perhaps that resonates with the group as well as it did you and I.
Mm-hmm. I like the ecumenical aspect too. It's not a concept that violates anyone's spiritual tradition or lack thereof. It's a very ecumenical idea, and that's hard to find these days. Frankly, it's really easy to offend people. Really easy. It's remarkably easy to say almost anything about anything, and there's going to be somebody, who's going to give you a hard time online, especially. But this idea that water connects us, and there is this sort of universality to the spiritual connection. That's the best word. Even, saying that as a scientist, it is a spiritual connection, gets us out of ourselves. You feel more oneness when you're floating in that water you want to be in. And I'm not referring to the water you don't want to be in. So if, say the water is, coming through your ceiling while you're trying to sleep, that's not blue mind. Or flooding your basement for whatever reason, or leaky pipe, that's not blue mind. That's the opposite, that's red mind. But the water that you want to be in. And people often say things like, womb-like experience. And, it really is not a clear, that's a very easy go-to to say, when you're in that warm water floating, it is a womb-like experience, particularly if it's, it's warm and comfortable. And, research on that is not particularly clear, but it certainly is a womb-like experience. And, we all spend about 9.21 months, plus or minus, of course. There were some, earlier and later arrivals inside our own private float tank called Mom, our own private ocean. And to get any sense of that back, particularly as an adoptee, I think is very comforting. And not, really, it's not even in the metaphorical, the symbolic sense, but in the literal physical sense, to feel held that way, and the comfort of water holding you, assuming you have the skills that you can tread water, or how to float, or you're a competent swimmer, or you have a flotation device, or whatever you need to feel very relaxed. There is a heldness to it. So I don't know if that brings up any thoughts or insights, or maybe you're just kind of thinking, yeah, of course, this is all so obvious. I know all this, and it's already part of your practice. Or maybe it's opening a door or flipping on a light. I'd love to hear from you guys. about that.
Great. Would anyone like to jump in? You can raise your hand or you can wave it in front of the screen. We can certainly unmute you and allow you to share.
Come on. Yes.
All right, let's give me 1 minute, Laureen. Hi, Laureen.
Hi. Thank you, Jay, for the discussion. I was especially excited about it. I too am drawn to the water, and for me, it's the ocean. And I even wrote about it in my memoir about finding my birth father. I live in California. He lives in Washington State, in Bellingham, close to the water. He's always been drawn to the ocean and to live near the ocean as well. And when I met him, we discovered we had that in common, and made a point of going to the bay, the Bellingham, there in Bellingham, during that weekend when I first met him, just to kind of bring everything together. It really just kind of rounded everything out, and for me, it's really powerful. The ocean does something to me, and I've never really been able to explain it. So I appreciate what you've been talking about.
Yeah, if you feel like digging in, whether it's via book, but we've created lots of shorter videos, and there's a video series, a 12-part video series that may find really useful and insightful. And you make that point of I find that, and the research will support this, that quality of conversations when you're by the water it's not a better or worse. It's different. There's a different kind of openness, and in the course of maybe finding biological parents, siblings, relatives, there are a lot of tricky conversations, and I've been through a lot of them myself, and our family, to say the least. And having the right setting, the right mood, the right surroundings, the right environment for those conversations is worth thinking about a little bit. And sitting by a body of water that you may have a shared connection with is a good place to have those conversations, and sometimes just being able to focus on the water rather than sort of staring at each other it's a positive distraction, and it maybe allows a little sense of privacy, but maybe brings a little bit of anonymity, sort of, and a little less intense, a little more relaxed. So I like to have a lot of my big, hard conversations, sometimes walking by the water, walking on the beach. It just gets you into a different kind of flow. Again, those water metaphors are unavoidable. Yeah, so it sounds like you had that experience on the bay there.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Any other insights?
All right, I see Suzanne waving. Let me unmute you, Suzanne.
And Lori was also waving.
Okay, I'm off mute now. Hi, I'm Suzanne. Thanks for this kind of these ideas. The things that come to me are, I grew up near a cove in Maine, so I guess that's my body of water. And you talked about having a body of water. That's where my adoptive mother's ashes were scattered.
Which cove, if you don't mind?
Haskell's Cove off of Oceanville, which is near Deer Isle, which is south of Acadia National Park.
I know it.
How well do you know Maine?
My father's ashes were scattered in Bakeman's Beach, Cape Rozier, Deer Isle area. My sister lives in Stonington.
Yeah, okay. Oceanville is actually a section of Stonington.
Yeah, she's Jill Hoy. She's an artist.
I know her, and she was in the big yellow Victorian with Sir Gatsby.
Yes.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
That's
Yeah,
my
mom,
biological sister. But.
She's your biological sister.
Mm-hmm.
Like that. I used to work for the newspaper there, the Island Advantage. I worked for Maine Public Radio, a different chapter of my life. But this cove on Oceanville, which is also Whitmore's Neck off of Stonington, was a cove. But strange things intervened. when very quickly after my adoptive mom died, my dad remarried someone actually from Deer Isle. They scattered my mom's ashes. That was, I guess, without me there or my adoptive sister there. And quickly, she moved, my dad's second wife moved quickly to really cut us out and then ultimately disinherit us and that stuff. So my body of water is not available to me. It hasn't been for years. Actually, have wonderful professional photos I got off the internet. And there's a photographer who now lives year round in Deer Isle, and I'm blanking on his name, but he took them. And so I have them as like screensavers. But to physically go there is literally going on my dad's widow's property, and that's not good energy. That's and I'm thinking, gee, maybe I should like get more attached to my bathtub or something. You know, a body of water, and it's not going to be Haskell's Cove.
Maybe a kayak. You'd come in from a different direction.
High tide.
Yeah.
Jill Hoy, I know her stuff very well. Oh.
I bet she's painted the cove. I would not be surprised if that you might want to check in with her on that might be another.
Is she on social media at all?
Yeah. Oh yeah, she's very, I wouldn't say prolific, but a lot of her art is out on online, and a little bit on Instagram and Facebook, but yeah, she would love to hear from you, I'm sure.
Oh, that's wonderful. And I'm actually in touch through Facebook with some people in Stonington, like the Henslers who live in Sunshine, where Haystack is, which is the art school that I'm sure she's very familiar with.
Yeah. Her husband, John Imber, is also a painter, and they painted the coast together, and it was often the basis of their relationship before he had ALS and kind of faded. Kept painting all the way to the end, but passed away a few years ago.
Jill Hoy, that's a name I haven't heard in a long time.
Yeah, nice connection. But I think your point that so our bodies of water can carry memories and joy, and also pain. They can be painful memories or painful associations. And through the years, I've met people who have lost loved ones in water and have been working to get their water back as a place that they could go again. With that strong negative association, of course, connected to it. And that's a healing, grieving process that it's hard to understand or relate to unless you've been through it in that way. So, I think there's also that tension that water brings, that it can be hostile. So it deserves that respect. Because if you're stuck underwater, you're not going to make it very long. You got about a minute, and then things get really crazy. But you can't live without it. So you get about a week without water, and then things get really bad. So it's that, and it's where we come from. Obviously, we all spent that 9 months underwater that started our lives. Don't have a lot of clear memories of that, but our entire nervous system formed underwater. And so there's a deep connection, but also, the memories associated with and that are carried in the bodies of water that we've loved over the years, or spent time, with those we love by those waters. It's just pretty complex and rich emotional, emotionally diverse conversations to be had with our family members. But if you're working with people professionally, the subject of water is a good one. It's a good one to tap into, to sort of open up conversations that may turn out to be painful. They may turn out to be very healing. I found. Yeah.
Thanks for that, James. Lori, I'm sorry if you had your hand up before Suzanne did. I apologize. Are you willing to go now?
Oh, that's okay. No problem. Actually, I kind of had two things. To me, water seems very cleansing. I think of just how water can clean anything, can wash away anything, and that's the whole shower thing. Just you can feel your stress just physically wash away. But also with that, autism. Kids with autism seem to be drawn to water. And I don't know if it's just because it's very calming to them with autism. Their senses are like overloaded. So I didn't know if the research on why autistic people are drawn to water so much.
That's a really good point. I'll read you a little passage. I'll find it here real quick. Maybe I might. Yeah, Naoki Higashida. There's a young man who wrote a book called The Reason I Jump. So if you're familiar with the autism literature, you may have come across his book. He wrote it when he was 13. He's a Japanese man now, Japanese boy at the time, 175. And I just want to read this because it's exactly on the point there. So Naoki Higashida wrote a book called The Reason I Jump. And he all of the literature on autism that he'd read as a young man didn't work for him. It was written by adults who may have been professors, and which is true in a lot of, you may have maybe encountered literature about adoption written by professors that you go, that person's a little out of touch with reality, or too clinical, or that happens, right? So that was Naoki's experience. The books that he found about autism didn't describe his experience. So he wrote a book, and it's a series of wonderful short essays. And so here's the one essay that I excerpted for my book. He writes, "In the water, it's so quiet, and I'm so free and happy there. Nobody hassles us in the water. And it's as if we've got all the time in the world." So just contrast that to what his life in the distracting, red-minded world of overstimulation may be like on a day-to-day, minute-to-minute basis, which is the experience of autism. Whether we stay in one place or we are swimming about, when we are in the water, we can really be at one with the pulse of time, which is part of the experience of autism, and even the research on autism. You're out of sync with the pulse of time. You feel disconnected, disjointed, distracted by everything, by the sounds, by the smells, by the touch of your clothes. It's just, everything is too much. And so you get, even if you're not on the spectrum, you feel that a lot of time in our modern society. The distractions pull you out of the rhythm of time. Mm-hmm. Outside the water, there's always too much stimulation for our eyes and our ears, and it's impossible for us to guess how long 1 second is or how long an hour takes. We are outside the normal flow of time. We can't express ourselves, and our bodies are hurtling us through life. If only we could go back to that distant, watery past, then we would be able to live as contentedly and as freely as you. So those are the words of a 13-year-old kid who was experiencing his life with autism, saying, "My water is my best medicine." Mm-hmm. And I wouldn't limit that. Those insights may ring true to all of us in some way. That longing to go back to that distant, watery past, however you may imagine that, to avoid whether it's pain, distraction, just feeling of overwhelmedness. I think it just so beautifully describes what you're talking about there. And the research supports that basic idea that Naoki Higashida writes about, and all of the anecdotes that I hear from grandparents and parents and siblings about autism and water. The one side note, this is for all of us, not just in the autism conversation, but there's the safety piece. autistic kids will sometimes run into the water because they love it, and they may not have a life vest or knowledge of the water or ability to swim.
Right.
So there's that, of course, that safety piece that I always want to mention it because it's so important, you know, that we be safe around water and acquire the skills and the technology is like a life vest if we need it. Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Great,
So
thanks
look,
for that,
yeah.
Jay.
Yeah.
Next up is Erica. Erica, I see you have your virtual hand up.
Yes. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hey, everyone. Good evening. Happy Friday, per se. I actually did. Okay, since we are within like the adoption triad, this question that I'm going to ask is particularly as it relates to adoptees. Now, within adoption, there's trauma. And so potentially, do you believe that, what is your take on how water is able to be a receptive, a coping skill, something that allows us to feel that sense of connection, sense of peace, because I think I know, it's just something that we're talking about, autism and how it's able to regulate those different those complex words. And so that's what a lot of I can only speak for myself. I've also kind of like through research kind of found that, you know, it's that sense of connection, that sense of belonging, that sense of comfort. And so what is your take on, you know, just how water is able to be a sense of peace for people like myself and everybody else on the call within adoption as it relates to trauma?
Yeah, I absolutely. And that's, I hear it over and over and over. And you kind of, you see it in the literature. And there's a lot more research on what's referred to as green space, which is,
Yeah.
you know, plants like parks, right? And what we find is that when you add water, you add blue space to the green space, it's even better.
Yeah.
So from a sense of calming and peace, sense of connection, a diminishment of the rumination. There's a interesting body of research on rumination, which is just worrying and, you know, thinking about all the bad things. Water helps us, nature in general, but water in particular helps us get out of that place. Right. So yes, I think also privacy and solitude are features and emotional benefits of being in the water. And then you talk about connection, and that connection to ourselves, the confidence and the connection. What we find with the young people in particular is as they acquire skill sets in the water, competencies, whether it's swimming or sailing or paddling or surfing, or any, you know, there's a whole diving under, jumping, doing a twist in the air and landing in the water. There's this, they learn to trust the water. They learn to trust that they can make mistakes and then fall into the water. If they're learning to stay stand-up paddleboard or something and you fall a lot, it's okay. You fall into the water, not onto the gravel, and then you climb back up and keep going. So there's the trust building that water allows, and it accommodates any range of ability. So if you find if you find gravity to be difficult for whatever reason, so we work with veterans who might be missing both legs and one arm, and they learn to surf, and it's incredible. Or the colleague who was working with a man who was trying to lose weight. He's a well-known rapper in Oakland, but he weighed 670 pounds, and it was interfering with his life, obviously in his career. And so they got in the water, and he said, in the water, I feel like an angel. And that sounds very sweet, but what it then says, on land, I've never felt like an angel in my whole life. But in the water, I feel like an angel. And I can do dips, and I can do pull-ups, and I can do all these moves in the water. It just got him going. He dropped 70 pounds in the first, I don't know, a couple months, and it was a big deal. So you see that, you know, the whole range of benefits that water brings to us, and it can be physical, but especially emotional, and certainly social, as we've talked about. You know, in Lorraine's example. Yeah.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I really do appreciate that. I'm actually I'm actually passing a lake literally right now. I'm driving. I'm so serious. I just got over a lake in Dallas Fort Worth area, and I'm driving, and I'm sorry if it's loud. But yeah, it did. It does. You know, just because it just creates that all of those things that us adoptees are looking for, that security, that peace, that comfort. You know. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. Yeah, I think the key point is do it. Don't. This is fun to talk. Really fun to talk about. It's certainly fun for me to write about it and share. But this is all just a big giant little, you know, entertaining hour, unless you get in the water. And so I'm not gonna hunt you down and stalk you and, you know, and bug you to find out. But hey, I may have to do that. But I want you to make a little homework assignment for yourself to consciously, whatever it is, if it's stopping at the lake and taking 5 minutes and just to really do nothing but appreciate the water, or lock the door of your bathroom and light a candle and take that, I know somebody was drinking a glass of wine, take that into the bathtub.
Oh yeah.
And just kick back and pay attention. Like, pay attention to the water like you never have before. Just try it. Just, you know, what do you have to lose? Just, you know, just pay close attention to the way the water feels all over, and it'll feel better than it's ever felt before. That's usually what happens when I do that. Just a little bit of mindfulness, and then share that. Once you do it, but don't keep it to yourself. Pass it on. Pass that insight along to the people you know who need it the most. And we all know somebody, or we all know a lot of people, perhaps, right now in this moment.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Jay, I want to honor your time. I know that you have your online or your Facebook Live book club that you are running, and you're going to be leaving us and going off to do day 68, did you say, or day 69 of that book club? Yes.
Today's Friday, so today's 68, I believe.
Excellent.
And then tomorrow, yeah.
Well, this is the 7th year in a row that Jay has done this online book club, and it's an incredible opportunity to really engage with the philosophy and the tools. You know, one thing that you kind of talked about with regard to the autism and adoptees in general is that one of the greatest things about Blue Mind is it's a coping mechanism, right? It's a tool that we can hand somebody right here and right now, and they can start making use of it to involve those mindfulness practices in their daily routine, and perhaps reduce some of the anxiety, especially in a day and age where many of us are sheltered in place and don't have the benefit that I have of being able to look at my water, people who can't get to any natural water. So I think that was excellent. And thank you for sharing about that.
Yeah, and I just encourage you, like I said, do it and then share it. And David has some really great insights. If something occurs to you down the road and you just want to bounce it off David, or get in touch with me. But you know, I really appreciate the work that you all do, and you know, I wish I hey puppy, how you doing? I wish I had a community like this when I was younger. I had water, which really helped a lot, but I didn't have a community of insightful people who knew what I was going through. And so, really appreciate that you provide that for each other and for so many others. I think it's, just so one of the things we do, and I'm going to end with this, and if I can find where I put it. Here it is. One of the things we do, it's just a little gratitude practice. And because we're doing social distancing, I cannot do it with you physically. Obviously, we're not in the same room. But I've been sharing for the past 10 years, these, it's a blue marble. And it's just a little recycled glass marble made by Marble King in West Virginia. If you're curious about the sourcing and the eco-friendliness, it is very eco-friendly. And it represents our water planet. And we just share them with folks that we want to say thank you to. And then if you get a blue marble, you pass it on to someone that you want to say thank you to. So it's a pay it forward kind of slow motion art gratitude project or something like that. And marbles have found their way all over the world and into the hands of some great people. So I wanted to virtually, with all the, I've cleaned it. I took an alcohol swab and I wiped it down. So it has no germs. I clean my hands and I want to pass it over to you there. Like, there you go. So that way now you have to reach out and grab it. Can you grab it? All right, come on everybody. Just reach out, grab that. Oh, there's got it. Okay, grab it. There you go. Kind of fun. With Earth Day coming up, it's a good time to remember that our waters are covering most of the planet. They make most of life possible, all of it, and they can be our best friend for life if we take care of them. And that's the key. You gotta take care of your water so it can take care of us. So I'll leave you with that little positive gratitude Earth Day message. So.
Very good. Jay, thank you so much for being with us tonight. We appreciate the work that you've done and what you brought to our group tonight. Thanks so much. I will be giving people your webpage at the end of the broadcast in the case they need to reach out, and I will mention your accessibility through social media. So thanks for being here tonight. Be well.
Please do. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jay. We appreciate it.
Bye.
Bye-bye. So what did you think?
Jennifer had her virtual hand up. I don't know if she was trying to get in before Jay left us.
I was going to say, that kind of goes back to, what was it, 2-3 weeks ago that Erica had her calming bottle with the water with the glitter. It all ties in. Now you know why you do that, Erica.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. It helps, I think I'm confident knowing that everything that we do for a coping skill, just adoptees in general, it creates a sense of comfort, peace. I run all the time by the water, and so it's just one of those things that gives me peace. The trauma, while going through therapy, just to be transparent. They say a therapist cannot be a successful therapist unless they're going to therapy. We all have issues. So, just knowing how it is such a benefit for that to be, so yeah, my calming bottle. Yes, it is a bottle that is calming.
Anybody else have any comments or anything that they'd like to share about any experiences they've had? I know me personally, it touched me, and that now I know why I get so creative when I'm in the bathtub. I get some of my best ideas in the bathtub, and I've written in my head so many times in the bathtub, and now it all makes sense.
Absolutely, that creative element is very profound, and he's done some research on that. One of his chapters is about the creativity that this can provide, and I have this conversation often with some of the clients that I coach, because a lot of them are also mentioning to me that they're bored, right? And growing and nurturing this attachment to the water can foster that creativity that sometimes allows us to go beyond boredom. Not 24/7, but those selective moments of hope that offers us. So well said.
Mm-hmm.
Well said. You know, there's a short video that Jay had wanted to play during this. Do we have time to do that, Marcy, or should we?
We sure do. It's
Okay,
what, 7 after. Go right ahead.
Why don't I do that? Where are we? Okay. Well, I certainly apologize to the group for the sound malfunction. It was one of those operator errors whereby it worked just fine when I set it up before the meeting, but is not working now. I apologize. I can leave a link for that to anyone who's interested down in the chat room. It's actually quite inspiring. One of the reasons he wanted to share it is just the visuals and the sounds, right? I mean, the sounds of the water and the lights sparkling off the waves and whatnot is very therapeutic and allows not only that creativity, but that connection and that anxiety reduction for so many people. So sorry about the sound, but I will put this right now in the lower chat.
Yeah, we can also share that on our Facebook page.
That would be excellent. In addition, I don't want to take away from what Jay spoke about today. I had recently written a column regarding Blue Mind and relinquishees and adoptees. I put the link in the taskbar as well. And if anyone would have any interest in that, it is a perspective on what we talked about as well today. So thank you.
Thank you, David. Anybody else have anything that they want to share this evening? Any comments about Dr. J and his presentation or anything personal you want to share?
I do. Now I realize why I opened my swimming pool, even though it's crazy. I opened it a week ago, you know, it was nice out, but I'm like, I can't be stuck at home and look out at a safety cover on my pool. So, you know, open it up and what do? You know, get 3 or 4 inches of snow on my pool today. But hey, I look out and I see water.
Thanks, Jen. Anybody else? Hey, Pam.
Hey.
What'd you think?
You know, I can remember as a kid, my parents would take us camping, and we were on the lake, or there was a huge pond there, and I learned to water ski really early on at the age of 7. And we loved being in the water. I'll probably end up with skin cancer, I'm sure. I mean, I'm not even saying that jokingly. I mean, because we were always in the water, and I always just loved it. And even as an adult or early adult, taking tests, I would stare out at the water trying to, memorize things, and that would relax me, I'm still that way. So, if I could live on a lake, that would be a dream. I'm sure it's not, obviously it's not just me, not just adoptees, but I think for us, it is special, somehow. Mm-hmm. It's such a calming thing. I love it. It doesn't matter whether it's an ocean or a lake or a pond it could be a puddle for that matter,
Okay, anybody else? Don't see anything else there. No last minute comments or anything anybody wants to share before we sign off?
Marcy, just one more thing. In this age of shelter in place, there is a really neat series of meditated short films called Nomadic Ambiance. I don't know if people in this group are familiar with them, but I've had a great deal of success using them myself to calm my mind, but also I've used them with coaching clients as well. Nomadic Ambiance. One in particular I'm thinking of is someone who's walking through a rain shower in Manhattan, which we might think ordinarily might be a little bit anxiety producing with all the activity and the traffic and whatnot, but you can almost smell the rain coming through in these videos. So if you're looking for any tools yourself, or you need someone's looking to have some type of meditative practices, or they're struggling with other types of meditation, that Nomadic Ambiance might be helpful to them.
Great, thank you. Okay. Well, if nobody has anything else, any other questions or anything they'd like to share, we'd once again like to thank you for joining us for the Friday night adoptee happy hour. Next week, we're going to have Becky and Oliver on talking about reunion social distancing style. So that ought to be pretty interesting. So make sure you mark your calendars for that, and stay tuned for another happy hour with Indiana Adoptee Network. Always remember to stay safe, stay home, and have a great week. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.